Welcome, dear listener. Take a deep breath and let the noise of the day slowly fade away. This is your moment of peace, a gentle time just for you. As you rest your body and close your eyes, allow your mind to drift with my words. Imagine yourself in a safe and quiet space where nothing rushes, nothing demands, and nothing worries you. Only calmness, only warmth, only serenity. Tonight, I'll share with you a story that unfolds beneath the midnight rain. A journey of quiet footsteps, glowing lanterns, and the comforting rhythm of raindrops against the window. As the story flows, let each word carry you deeper into relaxation, like a soft lullaby for the mind. You don't need to hold on to every detail, just let the images float like gentle waves on a quiet shore. Your only task is to rest, to breathe, and to allow sleep to find you. The evening began quietly, with a gentle stillness that wrapped around the small town like a blanket. The streets, lined with old cobblestones and narrow lamps, glistened faintly under the pale light of the moon. The air smelled of damp earth, as though the world had been waiting for something, perhaps the promise of rain. Inside a small wooden house at the edge of town, a traveler sat by the window. Her name was Elara, a woman who carried stories in her heart and silence in her eyes. She had arrived only hours before, stepping off a slow train that whispered across the countryside. Now, with her satchel resting by her chair and her cloak still damp from the mist, she listened to the first drops of rain as they tapped gently against the glass. The sound was delicate, like fingertips brushing across a drum. Tap, tap, ta. The rhythm had no urgency. It was steady, calming, like the heartbeat of the night. Each droplet shimmered in the faint glow of the lamp on her table, and Elara found herself sinking deeper into its quiet. Music. She opened the small book she carried, an old leather journal with pages worn soft by years of travel. In it were sketches of places she had seen. A winding forest path lit by fireflies, a marketplace alive with colors, a lonely lighthouse standing against the sea. And now, tonight, she began to sketch the rain. She drew the soft curves of clouds, the silver lines of falling drops, the gentle ripples forming on the puddles outside. As she drew, her thoughts drifted. She remembered nights long ago, when she was a child, lying awake in bed while the rain sang against the roof. Those nights had always felt safe, as though the world was cleansing itself, washing away worry and leaving behind a quiet lull. The rain grew steadier, but not heavy. It was the kind of rain that invited you to stay indoors, to make tea, to read a book, to simply be. The streets outside were nearly empty now, except for a stray cat darting under a cart and a man closing the shutters of his shop. Their movements seemed slow, unhurt, softened by the rhythm of the falling rain. Elara leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. She let the sound wash over her, imagining the raindrops as whispers of the earth. Each one carried a story, a secret, a memory. Together, they became a chorus, a lullaby that invited her deeper into stillness. Her lantern flickered, casting golden light across the wooden walls. The room was warm, though outside the air grew cooler with the night. She wrapped her cloak closer and took a sip of tea from the small cup at her side. The flavor was simple, herbal, and earthy, but in that moment, it felt like comfort itself. Slowly, she began to write in her journal. Her words were not urgent, not precise. They were simply thoughts flowing like the rain. Tonight, the world feels softer. The rain reminds me that endings are gentle, that nightfall is not darkness but a kind of rest. I travel not to escape, but to list every place, every person, every drop of rain has something to tell. As she finished the line, she heard a distant sound, the faint echo of footsteps on the wet street. Someone was walking slowly, their steps splashing against the shallow puddles. Curious, but calm, Elara leaned toward the window. Through the blurred glass, she saw a figure carrying a lantern. The light swayed gently, creating halos in the rain. The Travela moved with patience, as though the night belonged to them alone. Elara watched quietly, wondering who they were and what brought them out into the rain at such an hour. But instead of interrupting her calm, she smiled faintly and returned to her journal. Whoever the traveler was, their presence felt like part of the story the night was writing. The rain, the footsteps, the glow of the lantern, it was all connected. Threads of the same quiet tapestry. The hours moved gently forward. The rain continued, steady but kind, like a companion that never asked for anything except to be heard. Ilara's eyelids grew heavier, her writing slower. She placed her pen down and simply listened, her thoughts dissolving into the sound. She whispered softly to herself, as though to the rain, "Let the night carry me. Let the rain remind me. I am here. I am safe. I am at rest." And with that, the first chapter of her rainy night journey began, not with grand adventures, but with stillness, with comfort, with the embrace of a world that asked nothing more than for her to breathe and be. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm, neither harsh nor faint, but perfectly balanced, as if the night itself had chosen its tempo. Elara, sitting by the window, had allowed her mind to drift so deeply into the sound that when she finally opened her eyes again, she felt as though hours had passed unnoticed. The lantern outside still glowed faintly through the mist, its sway now slower, gentler, as though it too had fallen into the lull of the rain. She rose from her chair, stretching her arms with slow movements, savoring the way her muscles loosened. The wooden floor beneath her feet creaked softly, but even the creak seemed subdued, hushed by the rainfall outside. Curiosity stirred within her. Who was the figure walking so calmly beneath the rain? Perhaps another traveler like herself, or perhaps a villager accustomed to the midnight storms. There was no urgency to find out, but the thought lingered, weaving itself into the comfort of the evening. Elara reached for her cloak, not to step outside just yet, but to wrap herself in its warmth. She traced her hand along the fabric, damp still from her earlier arrival, and the faint scent of pine clung to it. Pine from the forests she had crossed earlier that day, when the mist curled between the trees and the world felt suspended in silence. That memory blended with the present. Rain outside her window mingling with the echo of rain upon leaves. She returned to her chair and leaned closer to the glass. Outside, the street seemed transformed. The cobblestones, wet and shimmering, reflected the lantern light like fragments of fallen stars. Puddles quivered with each drop, sending ripples outward in endless circles. The air was thick with mist, and beyond it, shadows of rooftops rose like dark waves. The figure with the lantern had paused, standing by the edge of a fountain. Ilara could barely make out their form, only the halo of light that surrounded them. They stood motionless, as if listening. Perhaps they, too, were caught by the music of the rain, entranced by its gentle insistence. For a moment, Ilara imagined stepping outside, her footsteps joining theirs. Two travelers meeting beneath the rain, but instead of moving, she allowed herself to imagine the story. She pictured what words they might exchange, soft greetings, perhaps a shared silence, maybe a story passed from one stranger to another. Her mind drifted further, the rain becoming not just a sound, but a guide. She imagined walking the streets herself, lantern in hand, feeling the rain trace cold lines across her cheeks. She imagined the sound of her boots splashing lightly against the stones, the way her breath would curl in the cool air. She imagined the town itself as alive, breathing quietly beneath the cover of the storm. Time slipped is unnoticed until she realized her tea had grown cold. She lifted the cup anyway, sipping slowly, letting the faint earthy flavor linger on her tongue. Cold though it was, it still carried the memory of warmth like an echo of comfort. She set the cup down and listened once more. The rain had deepened, the drops larger now, striking the roof with a hollow rhythm. Yet still, it was not. It was steady, like the voice of an old friend speaking softly into the night. The lantern outside began to move again, slowly, steadily. It crossed the square, its glow painting streaks across the mist. Ilara followed its path with her eyes until it disappeared into the shadows between two buildings. She felt no loss, no emptiness, only a quiet acknowledgement. The traveler had passed, leaving behind only the memory of light. And so she turned inward once again. She opened her journal and wrote, "The rain writes its own story. People pass through it, carrying light, carrying silence. We are all lanterns in the mist, glowing for a moment, fading into the night. Yet still, the rain remembers. It holds each step, each breath, each flicker of flame." The words calmed her further. She closed the book and set it aside, resting her hand on the cover as though it were the hand of a companion. Then, with the faintest smile, she rose once more and crossed the small room. The fire in the hearth had dimmed, its glow reduced to embers. She crouched beside it, stirring the coals with gentle care, adding a small piece of wood. The flames caught slowly, rising with orange light, filling the room with warmth again. She watched the fire dance, its movement like another form of rain, faster, brighter, yet still alive with rhythm. As the warmth grew, she leaned back against the wall, allowing her body to relax fully. The crackle of the fire and the patter of the rain blended together, two voices of the night speaking in harmony. She closed her eyes and listened. In that stillness, she felt as though she could hear more than just sound. She could feel the world itself, breathing steady calm, eternal. Her thoughts slowed, each one dissolving before it could fully form. The rain was no longer outside, it was within her, flowing through her breath, her heartbeat, her silence. She whispered softly, not to anyone in particular, but to the night itself. Carry me deeper, carry me further, carry me gently. And the night did. The rain continued its steady song, weaving through the quiet town like a lullaby. Elara remained by the fire, her journal resting closed beside her, the flames painting soft light across the wooden walls. The night felt endless yet gentle, as if time itself had slowed to match the rhythm of the rain. A knock came at the door. Soft 3 taps, then silence. Elara blinked, surprised, but not startled. Visitors at such an hour were rare, yet the sound felt natural, as though the rain itself had guided it here. She rose slowly, adjusting her cloak around her shoulders, and crossed the room. When she opened the door, a cool breath of night air entered, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. Standing there was the figure she had seen, the lantern-bearer. Their cloak was drenched, droplets sliding down its folds, and in their hand the lantern glowed like a small sun, casting halos in the mist. "Good evening," the traveler said, their voice calm, low, and steady. "Forgive the intrusion." The rain grew stronger, and the roads are longer than I expected. "Might I rest here for a short while?" Elara nodded softly, stepping aside. "Of course. Please, come in." The traveler entered, setting the lantern on a small table. Its glow joined the firelight, filling the room with warmth and color. For a moment, the rain outside seemed even gentler, as though grateful for their meeting. The traveler removed their hood, revealing kind eyes framed by lines of age and journeys. They were neither young nor old, but carried the look of someone who had walked far, who had seen much, and who had learned to carry silence like a trusted companion. Elara gestured toward the chair near the fire. "Sit. Warm yourself. The night is long, but there is comfort here." The traveler smiled faintly, gratitude in their expression, and lowered themselves into the chair. Their cloaks steamed faintly as the heat of the fire reached it. For a while, they simply sat, breathing deeply, eyes half closed, listening to the rain. Neither spoke. The silence was not heavy, but shared to souls resting in the same quiet. Only after some time did the traveler finally murmur, "The rain has followed me across many miles. Tonight, it feels almost as though it wished to bring me here." Elara tilted her head, curious. "Do you often walk by night?" "Sometimes," the traveler replied. Their voice carried a rhythm not unlike the rain-measured, thoughtful, soothing. "The night listens more closely than the day. In the dark, the world is quieter, and the stories I carry have more space to breathe." At that, Elara's interest deepened. She leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on her knees. "Stories?" The traveler nodded. From their satchel, they drew a small objecta, wooden box, plain and weathered, yet carved with faint patterns. They set it on the table, opening it with care. Inside were folded papers, tied together with a strip of cloth. "These are stories I've gathered," the traveler said softly, "from places far and near, from voices now silent, from lives both ordinary and extraordinary. Some are written, some only remembered. I carry them, so they are not lost." Elara's breath caught gently, as though the night itself leaned closer to listen. "And do you share them?" she asked. "Only when asked," the traveler replied, eyes glinting with a quiet light. "Stories, like rain, should fall where they are needed." The fire crackled. The rain tapped steadily at the window. Elara felt a calm invitation in the air, as though the world itself wished for a story to be told. She nodded slowly. "Then, perhaps, tonight one could be shared." The traveler closed their eyes briefly, as if listening inward, then untied the cloth and chose a single folded page. Their hands moved slowly, reverently, and when they began to read, their voice was deep and soothing, weaving each word with care. Asterisk, there was once a village at the edge of a forest where the rain never ceased. Day and night, the drops fell, soft but endless, turning the air into mist and the earth into mirror. The villagers grew so accustomed to the rain that they forgot what silence was. They spoke softly. They moved slowly, for the rain filled every space with its voice. But among them lived a boy who longed to know what the world sounded like without rain. He dreamed of hearing birds clearly, of hearing his own footsteps echo, and so one night he walked into the forest carrying only a lantern. Deeper and deeper he went, the rain steady upon his cloak. Hours passed, yet he did not stop. Finally, he reached a clearing where the trees opened to the sky, and there, for the first time, the rain was gone. Not a single drop fell. The boy looked upward, and above him stretched a sky filled with stars. He wept then, not because he was sad, but because silence was so beautiful. He stayed until dawn, listening to the stillness, carrying it within him. And when he returned to the village, though the rain fell once more, he never longed again for. He had found silence, and it had become part of him. Asterisk. The traveler's voice faded, yet the story lingered like mist in the air. Elara felt it settle into her heart. Gentle as the rain outside, she closed her eyes, letting the images move through her. The endless rain, the quiet boy, the clearing of stars. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered, "Thank you." The traveler inclined their head. Stories are gifts. They ask for nothing but to be received. They folded the page once more, returned it to the box, and tied the cloth again. Then they sat back, hands resting loosely in their lap, listening once more to the rain. The silence that followed was even deeper than before, yet it was not empty. It was filled with story, with presence, with the soft rhythm of the world breathing around them. Elara leaned back in her chair, her heart calm, her eyes heavy. The fire, the rain, the story, all of it wrapped around her like a cloak. She did not need to speak. She only needed to rest, to let the night carry her. And so, beside the traveler, she closed her eyes. The rain fell on. The fire had burned low, leaving only soft embers that pulsed faintly in the hearth. The room glowed dimly, lantern lights mixing with the gentle shimmer of rain upon the window. Elara stirred in her chair, her eyes fluttering open after drifting somewhere between waking and dream dot. The traveler sat still, their presence calm, as though carved from the silence itself. When Elara's gaze met theirs, they smiled softly. The rain has lessened, they murmured. Indeed, the sound had changed. Where once it was steady and insistent, now it was light, almost playful, tapping gently against the panes. The storm had eased, leaving the night refreshed, washed clean. Elara sat upright, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It feels different, as though the town is waiting. The traveler rose slowly, gathering their lantern once more. Shall we walk? There was no urgency in the question, only an open invitation. Elara hesitated, glancing toward the comfort of her chair, the soft warmth of the fire. Yet something within her stirred the same quiet curiosity that had drawn her to the window earlier. She reached for her cloak, pulling it over her shoulders, and nodded. Yes, let's. They stepped outside together. The night air was cool and fresh, carrying the earthy fragrance of rain-soaked stone and soil. The mist still lingered, curling along the edges of the street, but it was thinner now, more like a veil than a shroud. Lanterns glowed faintly along the cobblestones, their reflections rippling in shallow puddles. Each step Elara took created gentle circles, spreading outward, vanishing into stillness. The traveler's lantern swung lightly, its golden glow joining the silver of the moon, painting the night in soft hues. The town was asleep. No voices, no footsteps, only the whisper of rain and the distant creak of shutters swaying in the breeze. Yet Elara did not feel alone. Every corner of the street seemed alive with quiet presence, as though the buildings themselves breathed. Listening to the rain as they walked, Elara spoke softly, her voice nearly lost in the night. You said the rain follows you. Do you think it has a purpose? The traveler glanced at her, their expression unreadable but kind. Perhaps. Or perhaps I follow it. The rain carries silence, and I seek places where silence can be shared. It has led me to villages, forests, mountains, and now here. Elara let the words settle. They matched the rhythm of the raindrops, flowing easily, without demand. She thought of her own journey, how the rain had accompanied her as well, how it had guided her to this, into tis night, to this companion. They passed the fountain, where Elara had first seen the trap. Water overflowed gently from its stone basin, blending with the rainfall. The surface shivered, lantern light scattering into fragments. She paused, leaning slightly over the edge, watching her reflection ripple. It feels, she whispered, as though the rain is telling us something, but I can't hear the words. The traveler set the lantern upon the fountain's edge, its light spreading across the water. Not all messages are meant to be heard. Some are meant to be felt. They continued onward, deeper into the town. Narrow alleys opened into quiet squares, each one empty yet alive with atmosphere. The sound of their footsteps echoed faintly, mingling with the rains. Steady rhythm at one corner. They passed beneath an archway where ivy clung to the stone, dripping with water. The traveler reached up, brushing a leaf with their fingertips, and drops fell like tiny bells. Every drop, they said softly, carries the memory of where it has been: the sky, the clouds, the rivers. Perhaps the rain is not speaking to us, but reminding us that we too are part of its journey. Elara smiled faintly. A story in every drop. Yes, the traveler replied, and tonight we are walking inside that story. They reached the edge of the town, where the cobblestones gave way to a narrow path leading toward the fields. Mist rolled low across the ground, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Beyond, the dark outline of the forest stretched like a guardian, silent and watchful. Elara paused, feeling the vastness of the night open before her. "It's beautiful," she breathed. The traveler nodded. "The world is most beautiful when it asks nothing of us, when it simply is." They stood together in silence, the lantern casting a circle of light around them. The rain continued its gentle fall, softer now, as though blessing the earth with the lightest of touches. Elara closed her eyes and lifted her face to the sky. Cool droplets kissed her skin, each one delicate, fleeting. She breathed deeply, filling her chest with the scent of wet grass, stone, and distant pine. In that moment, she felt weightlesser worries dissolve. Her thoughts softened, leaving only presence. The traveler's voice came quietly beside her. "When you let the rain touch you without resistance, it carries burdens away. It does not erase them, but it lightens them, as if reminding you that nothing is meant to be held too tightly." Elara lowered her head, opening her eyes once more. She looked at the traveler, their face calm, eyes reflecting lantern light. She felt no need for questions, no urge for answers. The night itself was enough. They lingered there for a time, simply listening, simply breathing. When at last they turned back toward the town, the rain had nearly faded, leaving only the faintest drizzle. Their footsteps echoed softly in the quiet streets, the lantern's glow leading them homeward. And as they walked, Elara felt something shift within her, not a revelation, not a sudden truth, but a gentle settling. The kind of peace that does not arrive with fanfare, but grows quietly, like moss along stone, patient and enduring. Back at the inn, they stepped inside once more. The fire had dwindled to ash, but the room still held its warmth. Elara set aside her cloak, damp but no longer heavy, and sat once more in her chair. The traveler placed the lantern upon the table, its light steady, unwavering. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The rain had told its story, the night had shared its silence, and for Elara, that was enough. The inn was hushed, its wooden beams sighing softly, as though settling into slumber. Outside, the rain had nearly ceased, leaving only a faint drizzle that traced quiet lines down the window. The air felt lighter, washed clean, and within the room, the lantern's glow pulsed gently, as if it too were breathing. Elara sat in her chair, her cloak folded neatly across her lap. The traveler remained beside the table, one hand resting lightly on the wooden box of stories, the other upon the lantern's handle. They looked neither weary nor restless, only present, as if they belonged entirely to the silence. For a long while, neither spoke. The fire had gone out completely now, leaving the lantern as their only light. Shadows played upon the walls, lengthening, softening, dissolving. Elara's eyes grew heavy, the rhythm of the rain, the warmth of the room, and the lingering echo of the traveler's earlier tale all wove together like a lullaby. She leaned her head back against the chair, her breaths deep and slow. When she opened her eyes again, the lantern seemed brighter. Its glow was no longer bound to the table, but reached outward, painting shapes in the mist beyond the window. She blinked, uncertain whether she was still awake. The light stretched like threads, weaving patterns across the walls, shimmering faintly in the air. The traveler noticed her gaze. "Do you see it?" they asked softly, their voice steady, calm. Elara hesitated, then nodded. "It feels different. Different, as though the lantern is dreaming." The traveler smiled faintly. "Perhaps it is. Every flame has its own dream. Sometimes, if the night is quiet enough, we are invited to share it." The patterns of light shifted, forming soft arcs and circles, like ripples upon water. They moved slowly, gracefully, surrounding Elara with a sense of calm that seemed to deepen with every breath. Her eyes fluttered closed again, but this time what she saw was not darkness. She stood upon a path of stone, lanterns stretching before her in an endless line, their flames swaying in harmony. The rain had ceased entirely here. The air was clear, filled with the gentle hum of silence. She looked to her side and found the traveler walking with her, their lantern steady, its glow blending with the others. Together they moved forward, their footsteps soundless, their pace unhurried. The path wound through meadows washed in moonlight, fields of tall grass swaying without wind. Each blade shimmered faintly, as though carrying drops of light instead of water. Fireflies drifted lazily through the air, joining the lanterns in their endless procession. Elara whispered, though she wasn't sure why. "Where does this path lead?" The traveler's voice was gentle, echoing without echo. "Not every journey needs an end. Some are meant only to be walked." As they moved onward, the path curved into a grove of trees. Their trunks were tall and silver, their leaves glowing faintly like stars. The lanterns hung from the branches, each one carrying a flame that pulsed in rhythm with Elara's heartbeat. She paused, reaching out to touch one, and felt warmth spread through her fingertips, up her arm, into her chest. Memories stirred within her, moments of laughter, moments of sorrow, long-forgotten fragments of days gone by. Yet each memory felt softened, bathed in light, as if the flame had taken their weight and turned it into comfort. The traveler watched her quietly. "The lanterns holds more than light. They hold the pieces we think we've lost. Dreams, hopes, even sorrows. They do not disappear. They only change their form." Elara's eyes filled with gentle tears, though she did not feel sadness, only release. She let her hand fall back to her side, breathing deeply, allowing the warmth to linger. Together, they continued until the grove opened into a wide lake. Its surface was perfectly still, reflecting the lanterns above so clearly that it seemed as though the sky had doubled. Thousands of lights, above and below, stretched into eternity. Elara stood at the water's edge, her reflection joining hers, surrounded by infinite flames. "It feels like the whole world is made of lanterns," she whispered in some ways. "It is," the Travella said. "Every soul, every moment, every dreamer, lantern glowing for a time. Some burn brighter, some gentler, but all are part of the same endless night." They stood together, watching the lake. Time felt suspended, each heartbeat blending into the stillness. At last, the traveler turned to her, their expression serene. "When you wake, You may not remember all of this. Dreams have their own language, but the calm it leaves will remain. Elora met their gaze, her lips parting as if to ask a question, but no words came. She realized she didn't need them. The silence was enough. The traveler lifted their lantern, its glow brightening just slightly. The other lanterns echoed the movement, flickering as if in acknowledgement. The light grew softer, warmer, wrapping Elara like a... Her eyelids grew heavy once more, her body light as air. She closed her eyes. The sound of rain returned, faint but real, tapping gently against the window. She opened her eyes and found herself back in the chair, the lantern glowing calmly upon the table. The traveler seated nearby. The patterns of light had faded, leaving only the steady flame. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream, but the warmth within her chest, the peace that had settled into her bones, told her otherwise. The traveler met her gaze, eyes calm. The lantern has shared its dream with you. That is a gift. Carry it gently. Elara nodded, unable to speak. She felt as though she had been given something precious, though she could not name it. The rain outside sobbed further, until it was barely a whisper. The room, the lantern, the Netolavit settled into stillness. And for the first time in many nights, felt herself drifting easily, peacefully, towards sleep. The night had grown softer, stretched thin like a veil before the coming of dawn. The rain had stilled at last, leaving only the faint dripping of water from the eaves. The air carried a cool freshness, as though the earth itself had been renewed. Elara stirred in her chair, her body wrapped in calm. She had not realized how deeply she had drifted, how close to dreaming she had gone, until she blinked her eyes open and found the traveler still seated nearby. Their lantern glowed steady and warm, a single star holding back the darkness. The traveler looked at her, and for a long moment, no words were needed. Then, gently, they said, "The night is nearly finished. Soon, the world will wake." Elara listened. Indeed, she could feel it, the subtle shift of silence that comes before morning. The air was changing, carrying with it the faintest breath of light. Somewhere in the distance, a bird stirred, its wings rustling against damp branches. "It feels," she began, her voice low, "as though the rain has carried me somewhere, not across distance, but within myself." The traveler inclined their head. "The rain does that. It washes not only the world, but the heart. When it falls, it reminds us to let go, to soften, to rest." Elara thought of the lantern streamed the path of stone, the grove of glowing trees, the lake of endless reflections. She thought of how the warmth had settled into her chest, of how the silence had felt alive, even if it had been only a dream. Its calm remained, woven into her breath. She smiled faintly. "I feel lighter." "That is enough," the traveler replied. "Not every night needs answers. Sometimes it only needs peace." They rose together, moving quietly to the door. When Elara opened it, the air outside was cool and damp, carrying the last whispers of rain. Mist clung low to the ground, drifting across the cobblestones, glowing faintly in the pale suggestion of dawn. The town was still asleep, its windows dark, its streets empty, yet the silence no longer felt heavy. It was expectant, tender. waiting for the first note of morning. Elara and the traveler walked side by side, their steps slow, and the lantern swung gently, its glow soft against the thinning night. As they passed the fountain, the water shimmered faintly, carrying reflections of both lantern and sky. They reached the edge of the town, where fields stretched outward, their grasses bending under the weight of dew. The horizon was faintly silver now, a line of light pressing against the darkness. The world was on the edge of waking. Daddy-la-da paused, gazing outward. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her breath misting in the cool air. The traveler set the lantern down on a stone, its flame steady. "Every dawn is a story," they said softly. "It begins slowly, quietly, before the first color touches the sky. And when it comes, it asks nothing of us but to witness." Elara stood in silence, watching. The mist curled around her feet, the air cool against her skin, the light of the lantern mingling with the first light of day. The traveler's voice came again, calm and sure. "You do not need to hold on to this night. It will remain, whether you remember every detail or not. What matters is the peace it has given you. That will stay." Elara closed her eyes briefly, breathing deeply, letting the world settle into her. When she opened them again, the sky had shifted, hints of pale blue stretched above, brushed with the faintest gold. The traveler lifted the lantern once more, its flame catching the first touch of dawn. "My path continues," they said gently, "but yours is here. Rest in what the night has given you." Elara felt no sadness, only gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. The traveler bowed their heads slightly, a gesture of quiet respect. Then they turned, their lantern glowing softly, and walked along the path leading into the mist. Step by step, their figure grew fainter, until only the glow remained. Then, even that was gone, absorbed into the pale light of morning. Elara stood for a while longer, listening to the silence, watching the sky. The first bird sang, a single note that rose clear and bright, followed by another, and then another, until the fields were alive with song. The world was waking, and with it, she too felt awake, yet unburdened. She turned back toward the inn, her steps light upon the damp stones. The night had ended, but its gift lingered. When she reached her room, she closed the door softly behind her, set her journal upon the table, and wrote only a single line. "The rain carried me through the night, and I have arrived in peace." She set down her pen, lay upon her bed, and closed her eyes. The lantern's glow had faded, but within her, its light remained. Outside, the dawn broke gently, filling the world with warmth. Dot and Elara, wrapped in calm, drifted at last into deep, untroubled sleep.